Speaking of the 80s, here's something Bernie Sanders had to say back in 1980. I wanted to share this today, so check this out. This is Bernie Sanders in 1980, kind of nailing the problem of the media.
Commercial television, as we know, is owned and controlled by corporate interests whose only concern is profit. It makes no difference how many times during the hour are interrupted by commercials. It makes no difference what the content of the programming is. The function of commercial television is only to sell profits and make money for the people who own the stations. Public television, however, is a totally different animal.
So he's pumping public television. That's what he's doing with this. You know, keep in mind, Bernie had a public access television show when he was mayor of Vermont. This is pretty bad. Why didn't he have a fanzine too? Like, why he should have just went? He should have had a zine. This is the mayor zine. Here in the mayor zine, I interview Greg Graffin for Bad Religion. Next week, I'll be interviewing Glenn Danzig. That is right after my infrastructure plan and my public transit address. And then we'll also be talking about city parks. And then I'll be interviewing Jerry Only of the Misfits along with Glenn Danzig. This is the 80s, so they are still getting along at this point. So that's awesome. All right, let's continue watching this.
Theoretically, at least, public television is owned by the people and is supposed to be working for the people for their own best interests.
I like how he said theoretically there, because I'm sure it was a much better landscape in 1980, but now, even those public airwaves have been bought up. You know, nice, polite Republicans, NPR, they get money from the Koch brothers now. Anyway, let's keep watching this.
With regard to this station, it is my view that the University of Vermont, who currently holds the license for Vermont ETV, should no longer be allowed to hold that license and hold that important position. I say this because I think the history of the University of Vermont is such that it is clear that UVM is an institution which is dominated by business interests who are hostile to the needs of low-income and working people. It is my view that we would see a great improvement in the quality of programming here at Vermont ETV if the license was switched to a newly formed nonprofit organization which allowed democratic elections for the members of the governing body. As the economic...
Wait a second. It's like he's calling for media accountability that most of the other countries in the world have. Most other industrialized countries, Norway, which has the #1 press freedom ranking in the world, they have stuff like this. They have elected bodies, governing bodies that oversee transparency in media. Bernie's calling for that, and he's calling out what he saw as corruption in the University of Vermont. Now, am I fluent on the specifics of what was going on in the University of Vermont in the 80s? I am not. I am not at all, and I'm not going to pretend to be. But it's interesting. He's calling out corruption he sees in an institution that would compromise a media outlet, and he's doing this in Burlington, which University of Vermont, kind of big man on campus, pun intended, in Burlington. He's taking it on anyway. That's pretty gutsy by a mayor. Just saying, that's really gutsy for a mayor to do. All right.
Situation in our country and in our state continues to deteriorate as housing becomes virtually unobtainable, as the price of food goes up, as gasoline goes to $1 or $1.50 a gallon.
Man, weren't those the days? Weren't those the days? Man, you can't help but do a double take there. Oh, $1.50. Ah. Anyway.
It seems to me absolutely essential that if we are going to preserve democracy in this country and a decent standard of living, ordinary people are going to have to stand up and take responsibility for their own lives. No longer can they trust professors or UVM administrators. I think this station can play an important role in that process, and I hope it will. Thank you very much.
It's pretty cool. There's Bernie nailing the problem of the media, summing up the problem of the media, and he was doing this back in 1980, calling out what he saw as local corruption, not caring about what it cost him politically. or could cost him politically in the future. Interesting. So Bernie Sanders, why I mentioned that? I mean, first of all, I just kind of thought it was a cool video, but but the main reason I mentioned that is because we got something breaking today. Bernie seems to have his thumb on the pulse of what's going on with media, with what's going on with transparency, with what's going on with the different issues that we face in big tech and big media. Well, guess what Bernie Sanders did today? And he is the first 2020 candidate to do so. And this is huge. You guys know that I've been working on a banned facial recognition campaign with Fight for the Future. The Sanders campaign was one of the presidential campaigns I reached out to. I reached out to a couple. Sanders was one of them. And guess what happened today? Bernie Sanders wants to ban facial recognition use by police. Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders wants to put an end to police use of facial recognition software. Sanders called for the ban as part of a criminal justice reform plan introduced today ahead of a 2-day tour of South Carolina. The plan also calls for the ban of for-profit prisons and would revoke the practice of law enforcement agencies benefiting from civil asset forfeitures. In recent months, cities like San Francisco and Somerville, Massachusetts, have passed laws banning police and city department use of facial recognition softwares on the grounds of racial justice, privacy, and fears of misuse. All those fears are very high. All those fears are very valid. Fears. I fear fares. How do you feel about that? Do you fear fares? Anyway, all these fears are very valid. It has been misused by police. Facial recognition databases have been searched without warrants. They've been searched without probable cause. Police officers have tried to find information on an X. There is a huge racial bias in this very faulty software. A study in London found that it was faulty up to 98% of the time. They did a facial recognition scan in real time, and it was a train wreck. This stuff needs to be banned. Oh, and Silicon Valley, who's developing this software, they're also willing to sell it to private companies who can do whatever they want with it. Facial recognition software. That's not only an overreach and a breach of privacy, but it's also faulty most of the time. Private companies can have this. They can do whatever they want with it. Is it a big surprise that some of the first cities to ban this were the places where it's developed in? San Francisco, Oakland, first cities to say, no, get this out of our town. What does that tell you? Like what is, if somebody developed a new food product in Burlington, Vermont, and Burlington, Vermont was the first city that said, get this out of here, no thank you. Wouldn't you be a little like, maybe this food thing's not good? Maybe this food thing, we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be eating whatever this is. It was banned in its own town. You know what's not banned in any towns? Drinking water from a mason jar. That's smiled upon. So Bernie Sanders, let's see what else is going on in this article. A range of policy experts and researchers have urged Congress to take action regulating law enforcement use of facial recognition software. Well, it's not enough. They need to ban it. It's too dangerous. It's too faulty. And there is no research. There's no research indicating that this makes us safer. There's no research indicating facial recognition software is making us any safer. There needs to be a ban on this technology in law enforcement. All right. So let's see here. What else is going on in this article? Speaking on such issues. Okay. So I guess Pete Buttigieg also talked about this. But Sanders called for a straight up ban. And I guess Buttigieg talked specifically about artificial intelligence, as did Andrew Yang. But Sanders called for a ban. And he's the first 2020 candidate to do so. Well done. And by the way, you can go to banfacialrecognition.com to sign the petition. Banfacialrecognition.com. Thanks to Fight for the Future, there have been bans in Somerville, Massachusetts, in Oakland, California, and San Francisco, California. Cambridge, Massachusetts is about to become the fourth. Go to banfacialrecognition.com. Sign that petition. Folks are noticing. This has been a movement on the internet that has been around for a couple weeks now. We've covered it on this show extensively. We've talked about facial recognition extensively. Movement for a People's Party endorsed it. Tim Canova endorsed it. And Bernie Sanders was the first 2020 candidate to pay attention, to listen. That's very telling. It's very telling. Because I myself reached out to several presidential campaigns, and I did not hear back from any of them except for Bernie Sanders. The Sanders campaign was listening. All right. Good job. Good job, Bernie. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your